Robert Litwak is Vice President for Scholars and Director of International Security Studies at the Wilson Center. Rob, welcome back to Now. Good to see you. The deadline approaching on the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. A couple observations heading in. Everyone seems to be motivated to try to get something done. I saw a story this week, the Ayatollah Khamenei sending a top aide to the negotiations, raising expectations. So characterize what the environment is as we head into the negotiations. How would you characterize it?
Well, the P5+1, these are the permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany, have been negotiating with Iran over the scope of its nuclear program. The negotiations will yield an outcome, hopefully, that will allow Iran to retain a bounded uranium enrichment program in return for assurances that a civil nuclear program is not a masquerade for a weapons program. And as a technical matter, it could be resolved readily. But it's a quintessentially political problem, and that's really the bind. Both sides are politically invested in the process, but there are political impediments to getting to yes.
So we have broadly speaking, three possible outcomes: a deal, no deal, and a complete breakdown, and something in between. Let's break those down individually and get you to comment on how that could play out. Let's start with the notion of a complete breakdown. Is that likely?
A complete breakdown is not likely because both sides are politically invested in the process and they fear the consequences of a breakdown. The concern has been that Iran retains a latent capability that could become a weapon. But in a breakdown scenario, Iran would not dash to a weapon. It would persist with the status quo, more or less, but the politics of the region of the situation would be really exacerbated by the breakdown and the perception of failure.
And a deal, another outcome could be
a deal would be it would be a discontinuity. I mean, it would require both sides, well, particularly at this time of the Iranian side, to do something it's not been prepared to do, which is to accept a diplomatic deal with the United States in particular because of its status as the great Satan. In Iran, the nuclear deal is a proxy for this broader debate in the country over its identity, essentially, whether Iran's a revolutionary state or an ordinary country. And the only person who can really break this political impasse is the supreme leader, not the Iranian president, Rouhani, who's been empowered to pursue nuclear diplomacy, but has to check back with the supreme leader for final okay.
Stamp of approval.
Yeah.
And the third scenario, third possible column, is more meandering along.
It's looking increasingly likely because the first two options, break down or break through, one breakdown is unappealing, breakthrough is problematic. It's because of the politics. So you could see a muddle through scenario, but that would also be politically fraught. It would be criticized certainly by President Obama's critics, who would question the utility of continuing negotiations with Iran, and it might lead to calls for additional sanctions to ramp up additional pressure on Iran. It would not. An interim agreement would generate criticism here and perhaps in Iran as well.
A final thought on the possibility of a breakdown. A year or two ago, if we were talking about a breakdown, we might be talking about some saber-rattling potentials for bombing. Now, with the rise of ISIS and other regional developments, that seems to be less of a discussion or less of an option. What is the thinking in that regard?
Well, the military option has always been problematic, or in the last decade when it's come up, it's been problematic because it wouldn't end the program, it would just delay it. It could escalate into a broader conflict, and the regime actually might perversely benefit from a military strike. You could play the nationalist card, rally around the flag. But now an additional complication is the regional conflicts, the sectarian war, and the tacit alignment of Iranian and American interests in Iraq to bolster the central government, which is a Shiite government, against this fundamentalist Sunni threat, jihadist threat in ISIS.
So an incredibly complex negotiation got even more complicated.
Yes.
We'll have some outcome to speak of, and we'll have you back, and we'll figure out what the next step is, and let's hope for something positive.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.